It's because they know that what they have done, that there are some parts of it that were really bad decisions in the long run. And they don't want anybody to crack open any part of this because they know it's going to cause questions to happen. And they're going to get put on the spot. Okay, so you finally are coming clean on the fact that we've got NHI here, but we've got other whistleblowers that have these concerns. That's what they're going to have to face.
And when you say bad decisions, like what do you mean by bad decisions?
Well, think about it. If Roswell did happen, what did they do? They chop up some, think about it. You'd have etiquette if it was a Russian craft that fell. You'd catalog every part of that crash site, and you'd repatriate the dead bodies to where they came from. We give them back to the Russians in honor. And here we are. We've got a civilization just crashed there in Roswell, and look at what kind of crap we did to them. And we took all their stuff like it was some kind of a treasure trove, and now we own it? Hell no. You're talking about a craft that was manufactured on another part of the galaxy or something that they can't explain. Nobody knows where it came from. And here they are treating these people like they're just some kind of a lab experiment. Let's chop them up a little more, And then, if they ever got approached by the people that came to look for them afterwards, I wouldn't want to be the person that answered them, well, I'm sorry, we chopped up your buddy.
Greetings, and welcome to Ancient Library. This is ET Civilizations, Episode 1, and it's about the Greys. It took a while to work through the plethora of cases which involved the infamous Grey aliens, and at first I want to mention a little disclaimer, which is basically about the awareness of how to deal with a certain type of information. The Grey aliens are not established in the normal worldview as of right now, and therefore a lot of information covered in this program remains in parts highly speculative and also controversial. But at the same time, I will source everything I use to make everyone able to follow my thoughts in silence if they wish to do so. Let's start with the first chapter to set the scene, a quick overview of the more prevalent alien races which are present in the field of ufology as of 2025. So let's run through a few. So we got the Greys, which are at least split in two subsections, which are the small and the tall Greys. We also got the tall Whites, which suggests there should be small ones too, but who knows. Some people refer to them also as Nordics, other more to a taller grey alien type of being with paler skin. We got the stereotypic little green man, we got mantids, reptilians, and we got all kinds of dwarf and child type of beings, which are allegedly reported to be 3 to 4 feet tall. We got the beings from the Virginia case in Brazil, which were pretty unique in their appearances, a little bit like rays, but with red eyes and horns, and a strong sulfur smell, which was connected to the sightings. Then we got the more unspectacular ones, like the Nordics, which are basically highly advanced, good-looking Scandinavian people with only slight changes in their morphology compared to normal Earth humans of our kind. So there are lots more, but one thing I want to point out is the general morphology of the aforementioned alien races. They are all of a more or less humanoid nature. Even the reptilians and mantids, which are essentially a mix of DNA of certain animals, more precise reptile and insectoids, combined with the humanoid blueprint. For all the grey type of races, there are arguments and theories of them being future humans, which could be a possibility regarding their similar morphology compared to humans. But on the other hand, could it be that the humanoid blueprint is just a very good and common pick of a thing we could label something similar like evolution of intelligent life in the universe? So speaking of other races, which eventually developed far away from us in the universe and also got 2 eyes, 2 legs, arms, etc. So the highly used term NHI can be very irritating and confusing because it low-key only classifies Earth humans as humans by definition. So technically other humanoid beings, for example the aforementioned alien race, the Nordics, would be also labeled NHI while clearly being humanoid, but not human in an Earth human type of sense. A more accurate use of non-human intelligence like for light orbs or other more non-physical phenomena which emits any kind of intelligence to us is very prevalent these days, and labels like grey aliens or angelic light orbs are often attached with quick assumptions of them being conscious beings which contain or carry a soul, like we do. But it's pretty likely that most of the reported Greys are artificially created bioorganic androids, built to conduct dangerous missions traveling many light years, for example to reach us. And light orbs could be more highly sophisticated technological craft instead of light-based life forms or spirits from another plane of existence. There are many more alien races present in the whole field of ufology, and I will explore more of them in a similar video format in the future. So in this video I will focus on the grey alien race or civilization, how you want to call it, including many different types and potential substrains of reported grey type alien beings, and many crucial questions about their origin, potential motives, and the exploration of different models of what the greys could be. So let's start with appearance and morphology. So the typical grey alien type is characterized by its humanoid stature and can vary in height, but is more times described to be small, like around 3 to 4 feet. Speaking of the small greys, the tall ones are claimed to be over 7 feet in some cases. They got a big head, big black, more times almond or almond shaped eyes. They got no ears and minimal oral or nasal features, if at all present. Grey skin, which in the UFO lore is often connected to an alleged silicon type of DNA. We will expand later on the DNA and RNA part. They often wear tight suits, and it's mostly reported for them to have no sexual or reproduction organs, which would empower the assumption that these particular ones were bio-androids, but it's all pretty speculative at this point. I want to point out a few more things. If we look at this picture, which is using different old depictions of a grey alien, we can clearly see their limbs are extremely long, especially the arms in relation to their height and other proportions. For Earth humans, there is a thing called ape index. The ape index is usually defined as the ratio of arm span to height. However, an alternative approach is arm span minus height, with the result being positive, 0 or negative. Unlike the dimensionless ratio, this calculation produces a numeric value in the units of measurement used to represent the height and arm span. So in other words, for the most humans, it is normal for their height to be equal to their wingspan. There are differences in genes, in human races and mutations, pathological growth, which can affect the ape index. In old Vedic texts, gods are contributed with an appearance which made them able to reach their knees while standing. A thing pretty unlikely to achieve for any normal Earth humans, even those with a highly positive ape index. It doesn't seem to be a problem for these particular grey aliens we are seeing on the screen right now. I want to also highlight the fact that even if we include a portion of the more controversial information from problematic cases like Betty and Barney Hill, for example, it's hard to classify any races by vague reports about their appearance. The aliens, beings, could wear advanced, abstract-looking spacesuits for contact on unknown worlds, maybe resembling a practical humanoid shape. Like for example the exosuits in the Independence Day movie, which later in the movie exposes the real appearance and therefore morphology of the invading alien species. And I want to also mention that these days, many reported alien beings are getting labeled as grey type beings while only carrying 1 or 2 attributes of a typical grey, on which the data is also vague, considering they are one of the more popular alien races known in the ufology literature. In a later section of the video I will run through a couple of cases in which we explore more of these aforementioned vaguely described as grey type aliens, and also ones which are clearly ticking more boxes to be labeled as a genuine grey alien. Who or what are the greys? Potential models. So in this chapter we are asking the way more fundamental questions of the basic definition of these so-called grey aliens, and I will lay out 5 potential models in which, in my opinion, most of the possibilities are covered. Model number 1. Extraterrestrials, conscious, intelligent beings containing a soul in their body, like we apparently do. Model number 2. Extraterrestrial in origin but artificially grown, bioorganic androids with artificially created consciousness but no soul. Created by real beings like in Model 1, maybe even reflecting their maker's appearance. Model number 3. Time travelers, also including us from the future, also called the extraterrestrial model by Michael Masters. In regards to our established data, a decent take, also mentioning that the greys could resemble us in many million years. I still think this model is more unlikely than the belief in the existence of aliens, and all the implications further extrapolations could have, if the existence of ETs is ending up to be an established truth or fact. Model number 4, the Devil's Advocate model, a big psyop by Earth humans establishing the perception of a certain type of alien over decades and in form of countless cases and movie productions, etc. Also including straight up theatrics where using exotic technologies to deceive many people all around the world. Also including a variation of Model 2, so fake grey alien look-alike robots just with terrestrial technology. I had to include an option like that, and even if it's for the sake of obtaining an open mind at all times as best as possible. Model number 5, the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis. So to cover really any direction of speculation I had to add that as well. So basically the theory that these beings shared the Earth with us while being, for example, in the deeper Earth or in the deep oceans, volcanoes or other more or less unreachable places for us Earth humans, at least currently. I welcome any more options or models in form of additions if people want to participate on brainstorming on these things and possible but highly speculative models. If we would find ourselves in a betting type of scenario, my money would be on model 1 and 2, more likely even combined. So let's move to the next section, which is called Selection of Encounter Cases Sightings involving alleged grey aliens. So one, if not the most famous UFO incident or crash in human history. The story is pretty simple. In July of 1947, at least one disc-shaped UFO crashed near Roswell with alleged alien bodies which were captured, and of course the craft, which sparked a lot of theories on the basic premise of reverse engineering alien spacecraft. A huge cover-up and a subsequent creation and transformation of the CIA and the quasi-precursor, the OSS. There are theories out there which include possible capabilities of shooting down UFOs, insinuating that this was the case in Roswell, in which some kind of radar weapon was allegedly used, or at least the weapon technology was embedded in radar towers or other similar facilities, I guess to maintain stealth eventually. Some people also believe many technological breakthroughs of the last decades came from reverse engineering crashed or shot down exotic craft or UFOs. Before I continue, I want to run a quick clip, which is fitting very well here and adds a bit more context to this particular topic in regards to the Roswell case.
All of this is predicated on this sort of Philip J. Corso narrative that, like, you can derive any sort of material benefit. And when I say material, I mean literally like materials benefit that can work its way into any sort of existing technology stack. And so I guess that narrative specifically, which actually seems to be getting sort of more and more corroborated. You had, again, Jason Sands going on Rogan, and, you know, this could be circular reporting, who knows? But, like, he was talking about radars, high-powered radars at Roswell and White Sands, actually disrupting the flight paths of the crafts. And Rogan actually expressed skepticism, but it actually sort of makes sense from, like, a physics standpoint that radar might disrupt some, exotic craft like this. And, the stuff comes down and then, it gets collected. It gets taken to Roscoe Hillenkoetter, who's the first director of the CIA. And then Philip J. Corso, who is the, chief of the Army's Foreign Technology Exploitation Desk. He is given the material, and that material is systematically doled out to the private sector, namely Bell Labs. And so he says everything from Kevlar lasers to the transistor, or maybe it's not just the transistor, maybe it's like some sort of thing essential to integrated circuits and fiber optics. Like, all these things are derivative of these materials from Roswell.
So there's a lot of material on the case with a lot of details and good research which has been accumulated over the years, and I will leave material for people who want to conduct their own deep dive in this legacy classic UFO case. The more important part for us in relation to this program are the alleged alien bodies, which are surrounded by a lot of wild theories. I have to add, considering this is one of the first big cases which initiated a lot of movement in the ufology field, which origin were newspaper reports and bait cover-up activities. So in other words, if there was a cover-up, this was most likely one of the earlier bigger incidents which prompted the creation of crash retrieval programs or the like. So there are many, I will call them fragile sources, which are talking about alleged beings which were on board of the crashed disk, and the alleged origin, which gets also often mentioned in connection with, for example, alleged star maps drawn by abductees from other cases, for example, the aforementioned Betty and Barney Hill case, like claims about the supposed home system of the Greys, the reticulum system, or often known as Zeta Reticuli. In general, I will say, I'm extremely cautious with claims about exact origins or home planets or systems of alleged alien beings. I think this type of information is more important at a later time, after we come to a point in the future in which the existence of ET races is broadly accepted on Earth. But considering the general nature of the quality of the data in regards to scientific rigor, I want to add a quick clip here taken from an older video in which I present a more philosophical view regarding the matter in this case, using a statement extracted from a legacy UFO case, which is fitting into the bigger picture here, so I will run the clip quick. The Roswell case is reality because the UFO crash actually took place there. But this is denied up to the present day and will continue to be denied in the distant future by the American military and secret services, as well as by all government agency, namely with flimsy, changing, stupid and ridiculous excuses that will only surely testify to the fact that everything actually happened. With the crashed object, it concerned a beam ship from the reticulum systems. The crew did not consist of natural human life forms, but of human androids of a bioorganic nature. which means that they were artificial human androids, which the US Army also got a hold of, some living and some dead. And these were secretly kept in secret stations. With the bioorganic androids, it concerned effective artificial life forms, so not robots or the like, but independently thinking beings, in every way safe, capable of making decisions, made out of living material and living organs, bred in accordance with the human beings who are located in the reticulum system. In Earth-human terms, these bioorganic androids bred by the reticulum human beings are actual life forms, and as such, they are respected by the reticulum people and are also appreciated and treated. For the androids are indeed artificial human beings. As such, they stand under the command of the real humans of the reticulum systems. On WoW's behalf, they also carry out excursions, etc., to foreign star systems and planetary systems. And such artificial human forms were associated with the crash, as I already explained. The intelligence of these android beings stems from a bioorganic consciousness of an artificial form, which is just as capable of development as the consciousness of the normal, natural person. Therefore, it can also be creative and inventive. The type of consciousness is designed uniformly and collectively in each android, which means that all the androids have a uniform consciousness form. And so, they are collectively like-minded and thus they have a collective form of telepathic communication. The form of consciousness of these artificial life forms is built on an artificial consciousness, which does not correspond to an actual personality, but rather to an artificial form which can think quite independently, act and decide as well as develop itself further, but which is not arranged into conscious evolution, but only functions on a conscious instinct-based manner. This means that there is therefore probably a capacity for the development of the conscious form whereby ideas are created and thought processes can take place, which are creative, inventive and progressive, and thus capable of being developed. But all of this just deals with conscious instinct-based matters and has nothing to do with conscious evolution. In any event, the form of consciousness of these bioorganic androids is an artificial organic element, which has no inherent creational spirit form. The form of consciousness of the androids is formed in such a wise that it has a certain independence, in spite of the collectivity, whereby a degree of individuality is given, which cannot be compared, however, to an actual personality in a conscious-based sense. Nevertheless, it's its own individual, which may seem like a contradiction to the Earth person because they cannot understand these things in the tiniest part of their mind and still cannot make any conceptions of this. He/she will only gain these conceptions and the understanding as well as the knowledge relate to such android beings in the distant future. The bioorganic androids of the reticulum human beings contain an authoritative programming in their artificial consciousness, which prevents that the artificial beings could ever rise over their designers, respectively their creators, but the time of their lives is limited to 300 years of devoted servitude to these. Nevertheless, they are entirely free and can in every way decide as to what responsibilities they undertake, exercise or decline, and thus whether they want to focus on the task or not. So they are in no way subject to compulsion by their creators. In the kind and wise in which they are biologically created, they are incapable of performing sexual acts and also reproducing themselves. Their own and appropriate kind of consciousness is contained in their artificial brains, and as I already mentioned, the artificial bioorganic consciousness does not contain a creationist spirit form, which would drive and animate this by its own energies. Animation is provided by the artificial brain, which is constructed in such a form that it can absorb and use the cosmic electromagnetic life energy so that the existence of life is guaranteed. It is this cosmic energy by which the artificial life forms are animated and also made alive. All this, however, could not be recognized by all the doctors, surgeons and pathologists, etc. in the American secret stations, where the crashed android beings were taken. But how could they, since their knowledge relating to this was not in place yet? In fact, it will still take many centuries and even several millennia before the terrestrial scientists arrive at the possibility of creating such being like the bioorganic androids. Therefore, these beings will remain an unsolvable mystery to them for a very long time, as it is also the case for them with regard to the crashed beings in Roswell. Many descriptions of supposed living grey alien beings, which were found and captured after UFOs crashed in so-called crash retrievals, are often talking about a passive, active, minimalistic behavior. So for example, if you give them a chair, they will take a seat at some point and doing other normal humanoid things, but the general feeling of a state of being soulless is emitting from such statements, reinforcing the speculative idea of them being something like the previously described bioorganic androids. Which in my opinion is also, if considered genuine, the case in the Skinny Bob video. But there are a few things to mention here, because this footage is far from a naturally digitized 1940s recording. It's clearly edited, and the channel which has uploaded the videos in 2011 is admitting that in a third video, which is basically just a text message. Before I continue, I will show you the third video and the fourth video, which is the last one, of the almost 14-year-old Skinny Bob series. Usually I would cut down the videos to get a more compact, focused view on the discussed matter, but due to the short nature of the footage, I will play both clips to display 100% of the original video data. So the Skinny Bob case is hard to judge. If the original footage is really recorded in the 1940s, I will admit that I think the options to manipulate the video, speaking of CGI type stuff or similar, would be nearly impossible. Still could be a costume, and the editing, for example, the decision to reverse the close-up scan of the alien is questionable. But I will not bother you with my analysis. I stumbled upon a great site, which is going in very great detail on the Skinny Bob videos, and also keeping the investigation up to date. The page is skinnybob.info, and I will also put the link in the description. If you are interested in the Skinny Bob videos, I can highly recommend this page for any quick data point or deep dive. If we would consider the recording as genuine, I would highly lean towards this grey alien being a biological android type of thing. It seems to be so passive, and it's enduring measurements, so you can see the old thing above the head which serves for measuring the high in one of the videos, without being resistant in any perceivable way. Of course, I want to add that all of these assumptions are anthropomorphizing. The data my brain perceives to make any sense, even if considered genuine in a thought experiment type of framework.
Walton claimed that his first memory after his encounter with the UFO was slowly regaining consciousness and feeling an intense pain, as though he'd been burned all over his body. After opening his eyes, he saw a bright rectangular light above him. He then noticed that he was on a raised table in a triangular-shaped metallic room, which he thought was in a hospital. Walton tried to move and speak, but couldn't. He noticed an unusual object 4 to 5 inches thick, seemingly made of a dark gray metal or shiny plastic, curved along the length of his abdomen. As he slowly regained his vision and mobility, he realized that he was surrounded by 3 figures that he took to be doctors, until he looked into 2 huge luminous brown eyes. Disturbed by the eerie gaze, Walton leapt off the table and threatened the 3 beings with a glass-like cylinder that he found nearby. The beings were just under 1.5 meters, or 5 feet tall, with pale white skin, large bald heads, and large brown eyes. All were wearing seamless orange jumpsuits. The object on Walton's abdomen fell to the floor, emitting a green light. Despite a barrage of questions from Walton, the beings never responded or interacted with one another. Eventually, they backed away and left the room. Walton then exited the room from the opposite side. He walked down a curved hallway, past an open door, then entered a second one, which led him into a spherical room, empty but for a high-backed metallic chair in the center, and what appeared to be the outline of 3 closed doors along the walls. As he approached the chair, the room darkened and a pattern of stars appeared around the room, as in a planetarium. The effect diminished as he stepped back, and returned again when he got closer. After examining the screen and many buttons on the arms of the chair, he tried pushing some, to little effect. He then sat in the chair, which was a little too small for him. He pushed a lever and the stars began rotating around the room. Not knowing what he was doing, and feeling dizzied by the rotating effect, Walton stood up to look for an exit. Shortly after, Walton heard a noise come from the doorway, and turned to see a muscular, human-looking male in a blue jumpsuit and helmet. Walton stated that the man's only peculiar features were his eyes, which were a golden hazel color. Though Walton asked him many questions, the man only smiled slightly, but never spoke. He took Walton by the arm and led him through a hallway, and into a bare, small room, where they waited for 2 minutes before another door slid open. This led them to a ramp leading down into an enormous hangar-like room, with a rounded roof that curved down to the floor. Walton noted that the structure that he exited was distinctly larger than the UFO he'd seen in the forest, though it was similar in shape. He also noticed a few other saucer-shaped objects on the floor of the large room. The man led Travis across the large room and down a hallway, past another set of automatic sliding doors, and into a room with 3 more human-looking beings. 2 men similar in build and appearance to Walton's escort, and a woman with straight hair past her shoulders. All had blemish-free skin and the same strange golden hazel eyes. They wore the same blue uniform but without the helmet. Though Walton resisted, the beings took him by the arm and laid him down on a table and placed a type of breathing mask over his mouth. This was Walton's last memory before passing out and waking up on the highway.
Before we talk about the rather wild 1975 Travis Walton abduction case, I wanna shout out the channel Think Anomalous, which is doing great work in covering and especially visualizing some of the heavy hitters, standard UFO literature. There are quite a few to find on the channel. This clip was just a short part of a longer program I used to focus on the encounter with the beings, seemingly in this case including multiple races. Greys, which are 5 feet tall, rather short for human standards, but for recorded greys it's quite tall. So maybe these are the tall greys. And Nordic type humans with brown, golden eyes. Also the case for the greys, at least in this visualization, which are seemingly operating together. Maybe they are just biorobots in a universal appearance. So to expand that thought, imagine all type of space traveler civilizations got their own bio-drone robots, in form of different, for us as grey alien type perceived beings. But in this case, the more Earth human-like beings did not care about being clocked by Travis Walton. He claims something along the lines of, they hurt him accidentally while conducting whatever operation in the area, which prompted them to take care of his more or less severe injuries, because they might be friendly or at least neutral, and respect cause and effect and responsibility, and possibly it was necessary to drop the cover and expand above the normal guideline to only use the grey alien robots for interaction with us Earth humans, because it maybe was necessary. Another option would be that 2 or more clearly different alien or ultra-terrestrial etc. civilizations are cooperating and working together in secret bases, potentially on Earth or nearby, and took care of Travis for whatever unknown reason, also questioning their initial motive to appear in that area in this time and space. Any thoughts or insights on this alleged half of a century old kinda unique encounter? Let me know in the comments.
I know I feel something on my right side. And I turn my head and I see these 4, I'm going to call them beings. And they are not walking as you and I walk. They are just gliding across the ground. Maybe, I don't know how high off the ground. I couldn't really see that. But they have these little uniforms on. And the one on the far right, he had some type of a small wand in his waist belt. I've got a drawing of it that had a yellow tip on it, some type of a yellow tip. And it really got my attention. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. But the one behind those 3, the front 3 were the same size, exactly the same size. Looked exactly the same, but the one behind him was a chest and a head taller than the little guys, and he had this thing on his chest right here that pulsated the same color as what was on that little wand. And when I saw him, then I was afraid. Then I felt fear. Maybe just visualized fear. I don't know. They didn't do anything to me that caused fear other than where I was and what I'd just gone through. And then I went black. I just went, that's the last thing that I saw in my mind. And just a second went by, and literally when I came to, my weapon was between my legs and I'm still holding on to it. And I just looked straight up like that and right out the windshield of that 150 in its total blackness.
Do you think the beings you experienced are aliens, or do you think they're humans, or what exactly did the entities you encountered look like?
Oh, they look like grays. They look like the small grays, but the one behind them, I guess you would classify him as a tall gray. On Whitley Strieber's book, Communion,
Mm-hmm.
of course, the first time I saw that picture, I froze in my stride.
Mm-hmm. And
I had to have that book, and at Barnes and Noble or wherever it was at the time when it came out. And I literally, before I opened the first page, I literally just sat and stared at that picture for many hours before I ever even read his book.
What was the craft like? So you're in the inside of this thing. What did it look like?
A beehive.
Beehive.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, there were, from my looking around as I did in that playground, like I always try to take a mental picture of something, they were just multi-levels with all these small grays everywhere, going to and fro and doing whatever they were doing. I just got to look for a moment, and I was following one, and even the floor and the boards around the bottom of the floor had energy. Was everything emanated power in some way? The walls,
Was there humming associated?
not that I can remember.
And it almost felt like the tall gray was maybe in charge of these smaller grays.
Absolutely, in that room. Another thing too, I was not on a table. I was, from my memory, I was on some type of I was like wrapped in a triangular kind of beam or something that was body length, about 4 foot in the air, and as like a strange light would, not a strange light. It's even hard to describe, but it was as if I was inserted in something that was some type of a force field or some kind of a holding field that they could move you around in, like a gurney without wheels, a table without a back or wheels or legs attached to it. And I felt as if, you know, when they reached in, or when he lifted my arm up, lifted me up right here on my wrist, you know, it exited that pyramidal field or whatever it was above me, and it was in his atmosphere at that time. In hypnosis, that's what I saw.
So if we recapitulate the 1977 Woods case, we seemingly got 2 types of beings present, both fitting the gray alien stereotype. He reports on 3 smaller, 3 to 4 foot tall beings, which all looked the same, and the 4th one, which was significantly taller and of a different, in his words, more creepier appearance, also seemingly leading or commanding the other, smaller beings. I want to note that the majority of the information from this encounter is gained via hypnotic regression, a procedure which is highly debatable, and in my opinion, even if one considers this type of method as legit, it must be remembered that it's the only source of data for the whole encounter. This can be said for many UFO-like stories, but on the other hand, I don't want to discredit the memory of these alleged abductees, like Travis Walton or in this case Mario Woods. Anyways, I want to speak my thoughts on his story. For me, the interesting part was his description of the insides of the craft, which he called a beehive, which is a very interesting wording, and you will see what I mean when we reach a later section and expose more similar descriptions and interesting selection of words to conduct those, coming from totally different and unrelated people, which are only connected via alleged encounter and contact experiences with the so-called grey aliens. So another classic case, which is not so widely known compared to the Roswell or even the Travis Walton case. But I wanted to highlight this unique story in which different archetypes of grey aliens allegedly appear. The case also enforces the aforementioned model or theory of the smaller greys being some kind of assisting robot or drone, potentially of biologic or organic nature. The taller one could be a more advanced version, to pull a gaming analogy, a elite mob kind of thing, or commanding unit. Or of course, a real alien being from another planet. So you heard Mario Woods mentioning a name Whitley Strieber, who is known for his intense contact experiences with all kinds of alleged ET beings. Most prevalent in his stories are indeed the Greys. He was a fiction writer previous to his alleged UFO and alien experiences in 1985, which doesn't really help his credibility in the eyes of many people. I would say his book Communion is his most known work, which also got a, I would say, for those times, AAA movie produced, including Christopher Walken playing Strieber in the main role of the movie. He's one of the first people coming with alleged stories and interactions with Greys, participating in forming the initial perception of the grey alien stereotype. In the previously mentioned Woods case, he mentioned that intense visual impact the book cover of Communion had to him. So you can see his influence right there working actively in current times. He's a very dramatic speaker with a unique, strong voice, which fits perfect to present his in parts emotionally disrupting up to very strange stories. I've researched his work a couple of times and saw him commenting on other, rather controversial UFO cases, but always snaps back to self-centered output, seemingly not being able to implement other similar intense, ontological shocking information into his modus operandi of conceptualizing the current disclosure developments. In other words, he always circles back to his experiences. Maybe it's because he's very old these days, but in my opinion, as somebody who's presenting information containing more wild stuff than the Billy Meyer case and Chris Bledsoe cases combined, he should be approached with very critical thinking, considering the impacts of his story, if genuine and also if hoaxed. His claims are going from normal, brief UFO sightings at a young age, over a still existing alien implant which works all the time, and having dozens of alien contacts, to having a hybrid alien son who smokes all the time and appears throughout his life. Stuff like in a sci-fi novel, and if you are read into some UFO cases which are located more on the wilder side, you will clock that his stories are clearly some of the weirdest in ufology. In terms of focusing on the red thread of this video, speaking of information directly connected to the grey alien race and or civilization, his description of the alleged beings he had encountered are in my opinion the most stereotypical, not even relying on 1980s movie productions. But in my research I've listened to many hours tape on the guy, and he doesn't describe the beings in great detail in relation to the amount of words he speaks, while digressing from a precise visual description into more philosophical and religious things. So even if I try to keep it neutral as possible, it's hard to fathom his complete story, including all kinds of weird stuff. In the end, I would say, if he is 100% genuine, then we should accept that reality is way more weirder than any sci-fi story out there, making Maya and Bledsoe look overly credible in relation to the spectrum of woo levels in the ufology field.
Most students had agreed that a round, elliptical-shaped silver-colored object appeared among some trees just beyond the boundary of the schoolyard. The object had a lustrous surface and a bright white or golden glow. Most of the students only saw the object on the ground, but some claimed to have seen it flying over top of the schoolyard before landing. The object glowed brightly from its landing place, attracting the kids' attention, so they ran towards the fence to investigate. At this point, one or two small black beings approximately 1 meter tall emerged from the object. Some kids said that one paced back and forth on the ground, and others said that they saw one on the object doing the same thing. The being on the ground then began to move towards the students. The beings were mostly black, with pale faces and huge elongated black eyes that were angled inwards. Very few of the students reported any other details about the beings' faces, though at least one saw a nose and mouth. 12-year-old Liesel and 8-year-old Emily remember the being hovering over the ground rather than walking, though others described it taking steps. Emily said that the two beings hopped alongside her and Liesel, as if to imitate the girls skipping on the playground, though their feet never touched the ground. After covering a short distance, the figure or figures stopped and stared at the children, who all felt compelled to stare back in return. Emily said that the two beings she saw appeared in front of her instantaneously. At this point, some of the students began to feel that the beings were communicating with them telepathically, and a few students felt a rush of wind blow by. Several children saw visions of environmental catastrophe. Liesel said that she saw a vision of Earth after all trees had been cleared, and there was no air left to breathe, and received a nonverbal warning about humans destroying the planet. Another student saw visions of polluted oceans. Emily saw a quick succession of still images, showing scenes of the environment in crisis, and was urged to use technology more responsibly. Another student, Emma, received a similar message about humanity's destructive use of technology, and given the imperative that we mustn't get too technologed. 11-year-old Salma was holding Emma's hand during the encounter, and yet she has no memory of any communication at all, though she felt that the being was gazing into her soul, as she put it. Both Salma and Emily have stated that they felt that time was distorted for the duration of the encounter. Salma said that although she tried to run to the protection of her younger siblings, she was unable to break eye contact with the being. After several minutes of staring at the children, perhaps as many as 15, the encounter abruptly ended, and the intruders disappeared. At least one student said that he saw the beings climb back inside the object and fly away again, but most said that the beings and the UFO simply vanished on the spot. Emily claimed that they disappeared the instant that the bell rang for the end of recess, and her sense of reality immediately returned to normal.
Here, these are people of sound mind, by and large, telling me something that's very, they know that I might think they're crazy, and so they're a little concerned about telling me, and they're very full of questioning themselves and doubt, and the whole quality of the way they talk about it is the way a person talks about experience that happened to them.
So here I decided to create a short skit, which is giving you all the essentials on the Rua Zimbabwe area school incident from 1994. This case, in my opinion, is very special, having a lot of unique elements present. 100% of the affected people were kids, around about 10 to 12 years of age, and no adult person was involved in the alleged 15-minute long encounter which happened in a school break where most of the kids were outside. For greater context of the story, I will again recommend to at least watch the full 20-minute video from Think Anomalous, from which I've took the previously shown clip. To concentrate more on the direct interaction between the alleged ET visitors and the school kids, the chain of events is not too complicated. A disc-shaped craft appeared more or less instant, at least 3 grey and black grey alien type beings appeared shortly after, hovering towards the kids and locking eyes with them, and seemingly starting to initiate telepathic communication in form of visions and messages telling about environmental damage caused by us humans, while being too technological and careless about the planet and our future human evolution. So in other words, too much technology is bad, and they warn our newer generations via direct contact and telepathic transmission. They disappear after about 15 minutes, and to this day, the now adults and at the time affected children talk on the incident, not backing up or changing their story. At least on how I am informed on the case. Not telling you it has to be true, but if hoaxed, this would be a very, very sophisticated act involving all types of malign behavior and also potentially highly criminal stuff towards kids. For example, if speaking on theories of putting people like alleged contactees or abductees under the influence of LSD, or other potentially unknown drugs, or similar means to alter perception of humans in the framework of a psyop, fake alien abduction or contact, a la Rick Doty and Paul Benowitz, if you know the story. While also making dozens of young kids keep telling the same story or in disconnection hoax if we keep chasing that stream of thought. So in my opinion, very hard to fake, but not impossible, but extremely unlikely. To expand a little more on the present alleged ET beings, in this case they are described as also black, which can be caused by them wearing a spacesuit type of a thing. The location is a pretty good spot if the intention was to be unseen by any adult, civilian or military people, and to have a quick sneaky interaction in a wide open field area without any high concentration of people and sophisticated detection equipment. So if we spin this further and consider the motive, which seemingly was to give some children a quick intense message about the current state and future of the planet from an advanced observer perspective, who maybe had seen it all and maybe isn't allowed to do greater, bigger interventions on our planet, or they already had failed. I guess they had a good plan and executed it well if that's the case. There's plenty of data on this unique incident, and like you already heard, John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist, was on the case as well. So I will leave links for more material in the box below, and I'm curious on any alternative takes on this case, which was special but not unique. There are quite a few cases in which similar stuff happened in other countries, for example Australia and the UK.
There was a bright full moon, and below the moon was this little bright spot. We didn't know what it was, and we were filming out over the water. There was no structures in the water. There was no oil platforms, there was no ships going by, and we zoomed in. This camera had a 200 millimeter lens and an electronic doubler, so we were able to get very tight on the leading edge of the craft. The craft, you have to realize, is being lit by the moonlight, which is, as I said, a very bright moon. And then right in the front of the craft, there appeared to be 3 windows, viewing ports, whatever you want to call them. And standing in these viewing ports were typical bumper sticker gray aliens. And I saw this, you know, I mean, I looked through the camera myself, and unfortunately we recorded it. That video went to a university in Istanbul and went over extremely intense scrutiny by the Turkish government, and then the video was also sent to the UK and several other countries for analysis. By the time all that had been done, it had already been on the internet and could absolutely not be suppressed from the public. Recently, this year, the video was given to a analyst in Chile, and he did another review of the film, but this time, instead of concentrating on the craft, he concentrated on the occupants. And on my website, alienscalpel.com, you'll see the entire Chilean analysis.
So I had to include something from the 21st century, even if this case isn't seemingly a close encounter at first glance. It's not like a Chris Bledsoe-esque interaction, but there are statements talking about the guy who filmed several UFOs on different dates and times on the day, had some kind of telepathic contact or advice to film certain parts of the sky at certain locations. So this is one of the weaker and rather unimportant parts of the story, which is giving us so much video material of an alleged UFO. Even showing alleged occupants, which are described, or should I say decoded, as grey aliens by several people. On this case, I saw the wildest debunk attempts, talking about it being some kind of moonlight reflection which should be responsible for the whole flying UFO visual, respecting the bright moon which seems to be present in all of the Kumburgaz videos. But I'm not here to analyze this footage. I will leave a few links to the original uploads and investigative material. Speaking on the alien beings in this case, it's not producing much, which can be grasped. I'm not sure about the requirements and needs for conventional windows and seemingly highly sophisticated grey alien craft, which also exposes all the occupants to primitive recording tech of us lower earth worms. I might do a separate tome on certain cases on this list, eventually including the Kumburgaz one. So before we reach the next chapter, which is called Potential Origin and Motives to Interact with Humanity in regards to a possible existing grey alien civilization or race, I want to touch quick on 2 fairly recent and rather controversial testimonies speaking of more current activity in ufology. So the first one I really just want to cut on is an interview with a man who alleged worked and interacted with an alien which also claims to be coming from the reticulum system, called J-Rod. It's Dan Burr's testimony, and as I'm finalizing this video, a 100-minute podcast-like interview with the man appeared. I have to admit that I'm new on this particular case, so I'm not in the position to claim any value of truth to his story, but the details he's presenting are very interesting and pretty much reflected in several data points I'm making in this video right here. So if you're interested, check it out. Link will be in the description. The second testimony, you already heard the man speak in the beginning of the video. I'm talking about Jason Sand's alleged encounter with an alien, and I don't really want to discuss the veracity of his story. I just want to use the scenario and being which was presented by him as an example to conduct a quick thought experiment, which also serves as a good transition to the next part of the video. Before we proceed, I will play a quick clip in which he is describing his alleged alien experiences in his own words. The clip is cut down to the essential alien encounter. For more context, check out the links in the description.
So there's this guy in a uniform, looks like he's coming down the left-hand shoulder of the road.
How far away?
We noticed him when he was about a football field away.
Okay.
And he's kind of like standing there, and then he saw us, and he started like running towards us. And he had this funny look to his running. It was like he was falling forward all the time, or like he was running against a really strong wind.
Is he from far away, though, as you're first seeing him, is he running in a way that would suggest, oh, this seems like a human?
Yes, somewhat, yeah. He looked about human size and everything else. Yeah, everything, he just looked like he had a uniform on like mine, and he was just running towards us. And as we approach, that's when I noticed his skin had this blue tint to it, like he was hypothermic. That's what I thought. My immediate thought was that he was hypothermic and he needed help.
So it's like it's white skin, but it's turned like almost the
Yeah.
blood's rushing. It's not like a dark ocean blue or something.
Oh, no,
like that.
it's definitely not like dark navy blue or anything.
Right.
No, this is just like you or I. We're cold as all get out, and we're starting to freeze. That's what it looked like to me. That level of blue was like, holy crap, that was the level of blue. It wasn't because he was like dark blue or anything. It was just this undertone of blue. So anyway, we get closer and closer, and he's only a few feet away from the car, and we're slowing down. And the guy in the front seat, that's where I mentioned in the film with you that that's when he screams out that he's got no ears. The guy in the front seat. And I'm like...
the guy in the front seat that's sitting next to the driver?
Yeah, the passenger side guy in the front seat says he's got no ears. And I'm thinking, how rude. This guy's probably fighting for his life here, hypothermic, and you're talking about his ears, So I'm popping open the door. I'm trying to take my jacket off at the same time because I'm thinking I got to wrap him in something because he's hypothermic. And that's when I step out onto the roadway and I'm shutting the door. And that's when I look up at him and I'm realizing he has no ears and his eyes are twice as big than normal. And he does indeed have this blue tint. And that's when I felt like really scared because I was like, oh crap, what did I walk into here?
How close is he to you now?
He's only like 3 feet. He's like,
He's right in front of you.
It's like, me and James apart.
Is he looking you in the eyes?
Not immediately. He kind of, as I'm shutting the door and he realizes that I'm about ready to engage with him, he was like looking at the driver. I don't know what he was thinking about doing, but maybe he was going to hail him or knock on the window. I don't know.
Are you looking to see if he's armed?
No.
No.
I'm just more concerned for his health.
Okay.
At that point, because if he's on the range, I'm thinking he's in a uniform. There were no red flags for me to sit there and think like, oh, this is the criminal or this is some fugitive that's on the run, or stuff like that. This guy just looked like a dude in a BDU uniform or battle dress uniform like I had. So anyway, but now I'm looking at him straight on. I'm like, holy crap, this dude does not look human. And I'm starting to get really scared, but then he talks to me and that calms me down because I had to respond. And he's wanting to fix and repair his craft, and he's asking for that material, the tantalum.
What did his voice sound like?
It was not English at all. He did have an auditory, he spoke, but it sounded more like Norwegian or something like that.
So you couldn't understand what he spoke, but you could understand what he was saying because there was something telepathic going on.
Right. I could understand what he was saying, regardless of what he was actually saying.
What was he saying?
He was saying, my craft is damaged. I need some material to repair it. Do you have any tantalum? And I was like, is that titanium? He's like, no. And so I was like, well, pointed over to the Dreamland, Groom Lake. And I said, those people might have some high-tech metals and things like that. And this wave of emotion hits me like disgust. Like I'm not asking people like, barbarians for that.
From him, he's saying that.
He's saying this, and I'm getting that telepathic emotion of his being disgusted about it, me even mentioning it.
Are you at all looking at the guys at any point here who are with you?
Yeah, I tended to look over a couple of times.
And what are they doing?
They look like they were just zonked like zombies. Like, I almost laughed. Really, they looked comical. Like, just totally.
Literally like the Men in Black movie where people are stunned.
Yeah, and they're just... they're just kind of like, they're just zoned out.
Yep.
That's what they looked like. So anyway, I look at them a couple of times and he keeps talking to me.
So this is Jason Sand's alleged ET encounter, and there are some elements I want to expand and speculate on. So I thought a bit about adding this story to the Grey Alien video, because besides the reported more bluish skin color, the only stereotypical feature present are the much bigger eyes. If we look at the morphology of the reported ET and the nature of the interaction, we could extrapolate that a fully telepathic species would need no ears, if it's even possible to communicate with people who are not able to conduct this on their own. The bigger eyes seems to be a very common observation in many alien contact humanoid stories involving beings of all kinds, except a few, like for example the Nordics. Even in our brains, we got the most of the sensory cells used for visual input. So races which are maybe millions years more evolved seem to should have bigger eyes. And if we Earth humans already are on the brink of entering a time in which advanced psi abilities and precognition are getting more and more, let me say, accepted, what can highly advanced civilizations and beings do? So besides the physiological developments eventually for unlocking for us miracle-like abilities, there's another thing which comes with it, and that's the technological aspect. These days in ufology, the nuts and bolts stuff is getting more and more pushed back by the opposite part on the scale. The broadly labeled spiritual aspects or psionics, also including all these things like telepathy, sometimes in relation to autism or remote viewing in military programs. And most recent booming, the process of summoning UFOs and UAPs, a thing which was also promoted by Stephen Greer many years ago, for which he got an app to download and perform the so-called CE5 protocol. Speaking of the technological aspect, even for us Earth humans currently, many futuristic ideas, which are now getting more and more feasible, are inspired by past written sci-fi universes. So maybe this is how it works. To have a thought without having to realize it is creating all these ideas in our collective human consciousness, and if time passes more and more, these things are manifesting in reality. I think this happens all the time. A good example is if we would travel into medieval times and would show the people on Earth the functions of our smartphone, they would label it magic straight away. Even nowadays. Many people got zero clue how most of the technology works they are using all the time, and sending gigabytes of data through the air, for example, still seems very unreal to me sometimes. So who are we to judge any of these stories which potentially show advanced life and tech, for which we are like the medieval people from the year 1100? And if we know one thing about the universe, then it is that it's hard to conceive the scale of things, so it's possible to be the same with life and intelligent life like we call it. Does this blue dude really look so different to us? Considering how many different forms of life exist only on our planet. In the animal kingdom, we got millions of different DNA blueprints, which seem to work, and I'm not a studied astrophysics guy. But if we look at the nearest star, which is Proxima Centauri, we already got an exoplanet and the so-called Candidate 1, which is a potential candidate for an Earth-like planet, which of course got the possible detection of the planet is extremely preliminary, and the object may not even count as a planetary candidate, written under it, and is nowhere near confirmed, which I guess is also due to for us enormous distance of 4.2 light years. But I think it's remarkable that already the nearest star got a planet which is labeled a candidate type of planet. We are talking about the very next star in the universe with many more than 200 billion of them. Before we go to the next section, I want to highlight how less of a distance 4 light years are in relation to the framework of distance in the universe between objects, galaxies, etc. It's almost nothing if the Earth was the whole universe. Even taking one step on foot would be an amount which multiplies way more than 4 light years in relation to the scale of the universe and how we measure it. So if we put a general option of fake alien operations conducted by the deep state to steer the narrative aside, we have to ask ourselves if the Greys are real. Why are they here and do what they do or have done? Why highlighting the amount of UFO and alien contact cases involving alleged grey alien beings. But first, let's speak a bit about the potential origin, which is oriented heavily on the 5 models presented in one of the earlier chapters of this video. If we work with model 1, the ET model, which in my personal opinion is highly favored, also in combination with 2, the bio-androids, the amount of possible origin planets is nearly endless. The reticulum or Zeta Reticuli claim was not only present in the early Betty and Barney Hill case, there are multiple cases including a bunch of different people happening in different decades. I can't tell you who was really the first person who put the Zeta Reticuli claim out there. I think even the controversial Bob Lazar was presented alleged data claiming the home system of the Greys to be Zeta Reticuli, but there are some other claims even holding lesser factual credence. So this famous crop circle depicting a Grey with a big disc with an ASCII code embedded and 3 small objects. Most people will see 3 flying saucers. Others claim it's Orion's belt, insinuating this to be the system the Greys are coming from. The message in the disc was decoded and we will listen to it in a few moments. Before we do that, I want to mention that in the year 1977, a TV live transmission was supposedly hijacked and an alleged ET called Vrillen sent a message to the Earth people. I will link the full video in the description. It's about 5 minutes long and contains a more or less exactly the same message, which is essentially the same output of the Billy Meyer case and a few more. It's about a short time frame in which we enter the age of Aquarius by entering the radiation range from a special powerful, maybe the central sun, in which we can elevate the whole planet and make it a better place. After that, changing stuff is going to be way harder. So there's nothing in terms of profit generating or psyoping the public. The only imaginable motive could be spreading a positive new age message. So what's your take on that? Let us rewind to the Crabwood Crop Circle from 2002.
Das war jetzt dann der Abschluss des Jahres 2002. Naja, das ist ja schon ziemlich deutlich, das Bild. Ja. Das ist jetzt ein Linienrasterverfahren, was ein bisschen genauer ist als dieses Pixelrasterverfahren, was wir im vorigen Jahr gesehen haben. Und man sieht im Seitenprofil seitlich einen Kopf da, mit einem großen Auge da. Und da sind so komische Untertassen, die da so eingezeichnet sind. Und einer großen kodierten Scheibe, die eine Information enthält, die man dekodieren kann. Und diese Information ist natürlich bereits dekodiert worden. Also die nächste Botschaft ist schon gekommen. Das sieht man von der Seite noch einmal. Ja, das Profil, ich zeige es dann noch einmal von vorne. Das ist jetzt diese Scheibe, die praktisch nach unserem Muster, wie wir CD-ROM auch codieren, nach den digitalen Signalen praktisch codiert. Und das kann man dann übersetzen, wenn man das auflöst. So kann man das dann auflösen. Muss man halt die Pixel dann lesen und dann kann man die Botschaft dekodieren, die dann so heißt. Also jetzt sieht man das Profil, glaube ich, besser oben. Ja, das ist ganz deutlich, das ist ein Außerirdischer, das sind nicht wir. Und die Botschaft lautet: über die Grauen. Das ist keine Botschaft von den Grauen, das ist eine Botschaft über die Grauen. Ja, und die Botschaft lautet: Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Nimm dich in Acht vor den Überbringern falscher Geschenke und ihrer gebrochenen Versprechen. Much pain, but still time. Viel Leid, aber noch genug Zeit. Aber viel Zeit. Believe, Glaube. There is good out there. Es gibt auch Gutes hier draußen. We oppose deception. Wir wenden uns gegen Täuschung. So, das ist also eine Botschaft zu diesem Thema. Ja? Also, damit ist eigentlich ziemlich gut charakterisiert, wo das Problem liegt. Ja? Hier liegt das Problem. Und mit dem Problem müssen wir leider fertig werden. Und das ist eine Art Spiegel, den wir jetzt vorgehalten bekommen, weil wir selber emotionale Totalverschwender sind. So würde ich das einmal formulieren. Die insektoiden Zivilisationen waren auch in der Vergangenheit emotionale Totalverschwender, was dazu geführt hat, dass sie in dieser Struktur geendet sind, in dieser körperlichen Struktur, wo sie sich jetzt befinden, und aber dann erkannt haben, dass das so nicht weitergeht und dass man lernen muss, mit seinen Ressourcen umzugehen und dass man minutiös mit seinen Ressourcen umgehen muss. Und das werden sie uns beibringen. Jetzt in Zukunft gibt es da keine Verschwendungspolitik mehr auf dem Planeten. Das werden uns die Grauen beibringen. Und zwar in aller Härte, die notwendig ist. Und ihr technologischer Vorsprung, den sie haben, der ist so groß, dem haben wir gar nichts entgegenzusetzen auf der Ebene, geistig gesehen. Was wir ihnen entgegensetzen können, ist unser eigenes emotionelles Potenzial. Und an dem Punkt, wo wir das erkennen, werden wir uns auch zurückziehen. Was macht die Biene, wenn die Blüte aufgeht? Sie fliegt dorthin, vernarbt die Struktur durch Befruchtung und die Blüte kehrt sich nach innen und wir gehen in den inneren Prozess der Ausbildung des eigenen Samens. Das heißt, an dem Punkt, wo der Spiegel von der Struktur der Grauen auf uns heruntergespiegelt wird, wird die Erkenntnis einsetzen, dass hier eine Grenze erreicht ist, die wir besser nicht überschreiten, weil wir sonst den Rahmen sprengen und unsere eigene Existenz dadurch gefährden. Und an dem Punkt wenden wir uns von den Grauen ab und gehen in die innere Struktur des eigenen inneren Wachstums. Ja? So, das ist die Aufgabe. Und deswegen werden diese komischen Leute da als die Wächter bezeichnet. Ja, das sind die Wächter, die das überwachen, was hier auf diesem Planeten vor sich geht. Ja, das mag uns jetzt nicht gefallen, es ist aber so. Und mehr oder weniger die meisten Menschen werden in den Inkarnationen, die sie in der Zukunft vor sich haben, mit diesen Wesen einen direkten Kontakt auch bekommen. Die meisten von uns. Mit vielleicht wenigen Ausnahmen. Aber die meisten von uns werden einen direkten Kontakt mit diesen Leuten bekommen, vielleicht nicht gerade in dieser Körperlichkeit, weil der Prozess noch zu früh ist, das kann auch in der Zukunft dann sein, aber das ist das Thema, mit dem wir was zu tun bekommen und die werden auch da rumfliegen, so wie im Sommer die Bienen rumfliegen. Das ist halt einfach so und wie wir damit klarkommen, werden wir sehen. Das war auf jeden Fall die letzte Botschaft des letzten Jahres, die 2002 gekommen ist und weitere sind vorprogrammiert, so viel steht fest. Die Begegnung mit solchen Wesen funktioniert nicht so verbal. Die ist ein telepathisches Volk. Und zwar läuft es hauptsächlich über die Augen. die haben irgendwelche telepathischen Fähigkeiten über die sozusagen direkte visuelle Vernetzung praktisch über dein Auge in dein Hirn reinzusteigen. Ja? Und die rufen da alles da ab wie von einem Datenspeicher. Da bist du wie paralysiert. Da schaust dann in die großen Augen von den Grauen hinein und kannst dich überhaupt nicht mehr wehren, weil der praktisch dann dir die Matrix praktisch direkt ins Hirn über die Augen einspielt, über ein telepathisches Feld. Das sind solche gewaltigen Kräfte, die da am Laufen sind, das ist eine völlig andere Ebene. Der bist du an dem Punkt nicht gewachsen. Naja, es ist so, das emotionale Potenzial erschöpft sich im Intellekt. Das ist eher umgekehrt. Wenn die Emotionalität der unteren Sphären sich entwickelt und immer weiter entwickelt, entsteht die reine Intellektualität zum Schluss. Das ist die reine Gnostik. Und die insektoiden Zivilisationen sind praktisch in der reinen Gnostik aufgegangen schon. Die sind praktisch übers Ziel des Herzens schon hinausgeschossen. Die bewachen eigentlich die Herzmatrix. Das ist ja der Grund, warum zum Beispiel Bienen eine hexagonale Strukturform in ihren Waben verwenden. Ne? Und die haben ja zum Beispiel ein Matriarchat. Das ist ja ein Königinnenstaat. Ja? Und das läuft so, dass die Drohne, wenn sie die Königin sozusagen befruchtet, jeder einzelne Samenfaden von dieser maskulinen Drohne wird von der Königin aufbewahrt und daraus ein ganzer Staat kreiert. Weil die Erkenntnis dort schon so weit fortgeschritten ist, dass man sich den Luxus nicht leisten kann, die Energie zu verschwenden. Und aus dem Grund heraus entsteht sozusagen eine matriarchale Struktur, die dann über eine Königin in einem Staat praktisch kontrolliert wird. Allerdings gibt es da einige Probleme. Nämlich, dass man hier sozusagen den letzten Versuch unternimmt, die letzten Reste der Emotionalität in Körperlichkeit umzuwandeln und dann irgendwie einzufangen in einer Matrix des allgemeinen Bewusstseins dieses Volkes. Nur das führt dazu, dass die körperliche Komponente in einer gewissen Weise missachtet wird, weil die Matrix, die da drinnen entstanden ist, als dominantes Feld, als wichtiger angesehen wird als der Körper. Das heißt, der Königin ist es vollkommen wurscht, ob die eine Biene oder die andere stirbt. Die werden einfach geopfert, das ist uninteressant. Sie missachten die körperliche Struktur, weil sie sich selber als Matrize eines geistigen Feldes begreifen. Und das ist genau der Konflikt, der zwischen den Grauen und uns jetzt ausbrechen wird, weil wir sind ja totale Individualisten, ja, die ja extrem empfindlich darauf reagieren, wenn wir sozusagen in unseren persönlichen kleinen Animositäten verletzt werden. Und darauf legen die Grauen überhaupt keinen Wert, weil die Grauen betrachten sich als telepathisches Feld. So, was die jetzt aber versuchen zu schaffen ist, wie sie diese Hülle aufknacken können, damit sie an diesen inneren Kern unseres Erfahrungsschatzes herankommen können und den auch in die Matrix ihrer eigenen Zivilisation einspeisen können. Das sind sozusagen Energieschlürfer. Die haben ja auch alle einen Rüssel, ja? Und die fliegen meistens auf den Kern zu, wenn die Blume offen ist, um die Essenz daraus zu holen. Schlabber, schlabber, ja. Die Essenz wird rausgeholt. Das sind sozusagen Energiestaubsauger, die uns dann als leere Hülle zurücklassen und uns selber dann in die Matrix dieser insektoiden Struktur integrieren. Und wer das nicht erkennt, der wird da drüben inkarnieren, bei den Grauen in der Zukunft. Und wer das schon erkennt, der macht die Blüte zu und formt sich seinen eigenen Samen aus und geht dann wieder nach innen. Ja? Er kehrt praktisch in die Wurzelstruktur zurück durch die Vernarbung und dann fliegen die Grauen raus. Ja?
So before I give my synopsis on the grey alien topic, I want to process the just shown clip from a Lost Files episode I did a year ago. The link is in the description. At first, I want to note that I enforce free critical thinking, and my main objective is to present as much crucial information for a topic as I can. And I'm not flat out believing everything I stumble upon, exploring certain grey zones. No pun intended. In regards to evidence-based conclusions, based on the mysterious nature of the covered topic, in this case of a possible existing grey alien civilization, the best thing which can happen by operating that way is to find corroborating information. So when different unrelated people who are supposedly exposed to the same thing come to similar conclusions without interacting with each other. So one thing, which ain't carrying much information, but clearly many people just can't help themselves, comparing the greys they had potentially encountered with bees or insectoid behavior. Not only Strieber and the Austrian scientist you had just heard were mentioning bee-like analogies. Mario Woods couldn't help himself as well, calling the interior and grey activity a beehive. So I'm aware that these labels are loose descriptions, maybe more or less formed by our human memory data management, our brain, to make it more conceivable. But even if you just watch this video in its entirety, you will even clock a few bee and insectoid analogies. If we look at a close photo of a head of an ant, we can see some features which align with reports of the morphology of grey aliens. And if we look at life at our planet, in which we got a lot of insectoid creatures included in the animal kingdom, fortunately having a relatively small size compared to us. But if we imagine them being being able to evolve similar to us, just with different genetics. Just in our case, reflecting an appearance, which is known to us from potential present animal life, considering, for example, the efficiency of an ant colony, and also their individual abilities to be valuable for the collective, would shrink our position in the food chain immediately, wouldn't it? So if the Greys are real, the question if they are malevolent or benevolent would be easier to answer if we are speaking of them being hostile. I don't think that's the case, regarding their much more advanced tech and an assumed rule set of not intervening in other worlds. I guess otherwise the universe would be a mess of grabby aliens without intelligent relations between advanced beings. As above, so below, to elude my train of thought here. The next question is why there are still allegedly had abducted people and shown themselves at several occasions. Some people claim the US had a contract with the Greys, getting some advanced tech and giving them the right to do their genetic experiments via something we would label alien abductions a la Strieber. I mean, this would explain why most of the incidents were happening in the US. Hard to believe, but yeah, it's just a possibility here. Pretty wild explanation, but would explain them supposedly interacting so much with us in a certain time frame. I'm always trying to keep it neutral and regarding the data, unemotional as possible. So in other words, I'm trying to be as unbased as it's possible for me in any and no direction. So I want to also insert a certain take from another end of the spectrum here.
And what I find interesting about retail ufology, it's always, I was abducted and I was tortured and I was this. I'm going, yeah, that's the CIA. Oh, you mentioned the Greys. I know who manufactures those.
You know who manufactures the Grey
human
aliens.
Yes, they're not aliens.
Well, the gray beings that Whitley Strieber talks about.
Yeah, the fake ones, as they're called. So
how do they get them to abduct people? Like, there's all these stories that John Mack has talked about. He's interviewed so many people.
I knew John very well.
Yeah, and then he talked to, I think, hundreds of people that explained being abducted by the little Greys and taken up into ships and had sperm and eggs extracted from them.
Yeah, as if
how do you explain
talk
that?
About delusions of grandeur, like they need our sperm and eggs.
So I'm not entirely sure if he was talking about all reported grey alien beings, calling them the fake ones, or just certain ones. I would have liked if Danny had asked him how he explains the 1994 Rua Zimbabwe incident and the alleged interaction with dozens of children, but who knows. I wanted to present many aspects of the grey alien civilization subject, and considering the fact that we humans always learn more and correct errors, I will not call the following quick synopsis an internal judgment from my side. So is it possible that these beings really exist in our coherent reality, maybe originating from a quasi-Earth-like planet, in the same way insects and humans evolved on planet Earth, just in another combination of millions of years, eventually way more millions than we got covered here on this planet, with their own history and something people would call their own type of evolution, being many steps ahead of us? Yes is my answer, clearly possible from my side. This doesn't mean every story about the Greys has to be truthful, but the collective hallucination would be too accurate in terms of describing the encountered beings from so many people, so similar in their appearance and optic. We got a lot of crazy people on this planet, but I think there are way less of them active in ufology than most of people think. There's no way this field of knowledge will not be ending up in a form of real science at a certain point in the future, maybe with another label. So we now reach the epilogue of this program, in which I give you my closing thoughts on the subject. I want to begin with stating that we have almost zero established acknowledged facts about any extraterrestrial life at this point. So you have to ask yourself, considering the rate on which things are getting updated and advanced over time, like speaking of science and technology, if it's really so far-fetched to believe in potential extraterrestrial creatures like the grey aliens. I really hope we will be able to learn more about life and death and our supposed soul, especially the existence of the soul is a thing which seems very real to me. And if we operate from a point of view in which the existing soul is an established fact, we could speculate further about other beings potentially having souls as well. And I don't want to digress too much from the original subject, but there is some literature in ufology which points to the possibility of our souls, in this case, are somewhat bound to our planet, to planet Earth. So you live lives on this planet, potentially multiple thousands of them, reincarnating in new DNA suits, while following a certain procedure involving advanced knowledge about souls and their origin and purpose. Of course, this type of data is impossible to prove. Maybe in a few hundred years, when we potentially reach a point of spiritual and technological sophistication, similar to supposed space travelers like the Greys. The last thought on which I want to elaborate on is, if the reported interaction with grey beings are genuine, they obviously have a motivation for doing whatever they are doing, which can't be based on our technology or our planet. They could find many similar planets with whatever warp drive stuff they are using. So I think the reason must be something more spiritual, something immaterial or soul-based. In any case, something valuable we are not able to decode about ourselves yet.
Naja, im Ausgleich selber besteht ja die Hoffnung, dass man sagt, okay, in der Integration beider Energieformen können beide Seiten etwas lernen. Sie können sozusagen Lebensenergie zurückgewinnen und wir können lernen, im Sinne des Recyclings eine verantwortungsvollere Bewusstseinsform zu entwickeln. Und in diesem Konfliktausgleichspotenzial liegt eigentlich die Hoffnung der Zukunft. Das ist klar. Nur es kann auch sehr schnell übers Ziel hinausschießen. Ja? Und in den Veden wird das so beschrieben. Es hat also es gibt ja in England zum Beispiel die mythologische Figur des grünen Mannes oder auch des Peter Pan, hat da schon mal jeder was davon gehört. Ja? In Indien heißt dieser grüne Mann, der Peter Pan heißt dort Ramachandra, der glücksspendende Mond, weil die Mondenergie die Pflanzen halt fördert und die grüne Form in der personifizierten Form der Natur ist halt als dieser Ramachandra oder Peter Pan bekannt, ja? Der übrigens dann diese Steinbockhörner hat, das ist ja auch interessant. So, und dieser grüne Mann, da wird in den Veden die Geschichte des Ramayanas erzählt, das vielleicht zum Abschluss. Der ist also mit seiner Frau Sita Devi, hat im Wald gelebt und war die Verkörperung der grünen Energie praktisch. Und da ist ein Wesen gekommen, dessen Name war Surpanak, das war eine Frau. Und die kommt aus diesem insektoiden Strahl. Und die ist dorthin geflogen sozusagen und hat diesen Ramachandra gesehen und hat sich voll in ihn verknallt. Das ist das Thema der Insekten, dass sie sich halt in die Blütenform der grünen Natur verknallen. Ja. Da hat sich voll in ihn verknallt und der Ramachandra hat eine Zeit lang, so wird das in der Geschichte auch erzählt, mit der herumgedurdelt, aber letztendlich hat er sich dafür entschieden, Abstand zu nehmen. Und nachdem sie nicht an ihr Ziel gekommen ist, hat sie sich überlegt, wie sie das Problem lösen kann. Und die Frau von dem Ramachandra, das war die goldene Sita, die eigentlich mit diesem Blütennektar was zu tun hat. Und da hat sie beschlossen, diese Frau zu verschlingen. Das ist diesen Nektar, den die Insekten praktisch raussaugen, damit sie an das grüne Schloss herankommen. Das ist übrigens das grüne Schloss des Maya-Kalenders dann nachher. Ja? Deswegen sind die Mayas auch im Urwald, ganz nebenbei bemerkt. Ja? Im grünen Urwald in Guatemala und so weiter. Auf jeden Fall ist es dann so gewesen, dass dann diese Verschlingung der Sita Devi, der Goldenen, eskaliert ist und der Ramachandra hat die Konsequenzen daraus gezogen und es wird in der Geschichte beschrieben, dass er dieser Surpanak mit einem Schwert die Nase und die Ohren abgeschnitten hat. Ja? Und wenn man Insekten betrachtet, die haben keine Nase und die haben auch keine Ohren. Und denen fehlen zwei Dinge. Die körperliche Struktur der Erde, mit der haben sie ein Riesenproblem, weil sie diese missachten, und das Thema der Information. Sie haben nicht zugehört, also falsch herum, sie haben nicht hingehört, sondern sie haben zugehört. So, ja? Das bedeutet, dass sie durch die Missachtung der vergangenen Botschaften, die sie spirituell bekommen haben, praktisch in diese Misere hineingesteuert sind. Das drückt sich dann entsprechend körperlich auch aus. Diese Verstümmelung hat so einen nicht besonders ästhetischen Aussehen geführt. Insekten sind ja gerade dafür bekannt, von unserer Warte aus gesehen, dass sie sehr ästhetisch sind. Und die Surpanak hat sich als verstümmelt empfunden. Und in dieser Verstümmelung ist sie zu ihrem Bruder, das ist dieses Monster da, dieses menschenfressende Monster, zum Ravana gegangen und gesagt, du, schau dir mal an, was die mit mir gemacht haben. Die haben mir die Ohren und die Nase abgeschnitten. Das ist ja wirklich der Wahnsinn. Ich habe mich verliebt in diesen schönen Mann und jetzt dann als Preis dafür haben sie mir praktisch...
Let me just rephrase it for you. Can you describe in detail the first time, what it was like to meet this being for the first time?
My original feeling was I was looking at a giant insect. It's the best I can just off the cuff. It looked like a giant insect, being dark brown, hunched in a corner, very insectoid in appearance. It almost looked like it had an exoskeleton. I felt afraid inside because I was always told that monsters weren't real.
We can take a journey. We have that freedom to take a journey. And the Greys do not have that freedom. They know too much to have that kind of freedom. But they see too far ahead in time and too far back in time too clearly to really have free will. They don't have free will.